Next, we have a main stage session. Want to be able to welcome forward 3 people. It's going to be a lively conversation. You cannot get more coffee right now. You need to stay in the room for this, but they will be the caffeine you need. Would like to welcome forward Marion Phillips, Senior Vice President for Community Development and DEI, U.S. News and World Report, Lori Lampman, Chief Human Resources Officer, HARMAN International, and Livia Konkel, Corporate Vice President, Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion, and Corporate Citizenship at Charles River Laboratories. Please welcome them. And so I say that this is going to be a lively conversation because each of them brings a different level of experiences to their work. They all have a different portfolio of responsibility. And with that, this brings unique perspectives. And so I'm excited for us to be able to have this conversation. And I'm going to move back so people over here feel like they can see me. Hello. And we want to be able to talk about this really hard issue. We know that you all don't necessarily directly influence and control who is in your C-suite and who is the leadership at your organization, but prompting these conversations is important, and I think there's some good insights that these leaders can bring to this conversation. We also know that companies that have prioritized that representation have experienced increased corporate success in many capacities, including innovation and financial returns. And so what we want to do right now is dig a little bit into the conversation around leadership. And we know that there are benefits of having a diverse leadership team, both in the business performance and organizational culture. And so to kick that off, want each of them to talk a little bit about their company, the work that they do, and kind of that topic and how you all are approaching it. So we'll start with you, Marion.
Good morning.
Can we hear your mic?
I don't think so. I think we're going to go to someone else first.
Okay.
Excuse me.
Yeah, go ahead. Yes, please, Lori.
Oh, okay. Hello, everyone. I'm Lori Lampman. I'm the Chief Human Resource Officer for HARMAN International. We are a division of Samsung, and we have about 34,000 employees spread out over 30 countries. So we are, by nature, a very diverse, culturally diverse organization, and that's actually very much at the heart of who we are, how we found success in business. And within that, I'm responsible for diversity, equity, and inclusion as part of human resources. We have very strong commitment from our management team, which is a diverse group itself. We have men, women, people of color, different countries, different cultures and backgrounds, ages. So we have a very diverse leadership team, which I think has really helped us promote that culture of inclusion within the organization. And I think from a diversity and equity perspective, having that inclusive environment at the start then leads to more diversity and equity within your organization. So a little bit about
Wonderful.
us.
Marion wants to run back up here now.
Okay.
Thank you.
Absolutely. So let's go to Livia, and then we'll go to you so you can, catch your breath here. Go for it.
All right. I'm Livia Konkel. I'm Vice President for Diversity, Equity, Inclusion, and Corporate Citizenship at Charles River Labs. Charles River Labs, if you haven't heard of it, our big stat is that we are involved in 80% of all the FDA-approved drugs over the last 5 years. So you may not have heard of us, but we're probably part of your life somehow. Mm-hmm. I look after DE&I, and when I started about 2.5 years ago, that was really the start of our function. I was very grateful and very blessed to come into an organization that does have strong DE&I commitment. I won't say we quite have as much diversity at the top as Lori spoke to. We have strong nationalities in terms of representation. Female leadership is amazing, but we have some opportunities as well around people of color. And so that's something that we're focused and really committed on. But one of the things that I love about my organization is that corporate citizenship, ESG, giving, and DE&I is all combined together.
Great. Thank you. Marion.
I'm Marion Phillips III. I'm our Senior Vice President for Community Development and DEI at U.S. News and World Report. So I always call us an Oreo. The C-suite is about 50-50. in terms of people of color and women and men. The entry level, we do extraordinarily well, which a lot of companies have been doing for the last 4 or 5 years, recruiting better with the intent of percolating. Our senior managers is where the bulk of the company is. And I see all of you nodding with me, so you get this, right? Not because you like Oreos, I hope. But we're in that space where we are not that diverse. Having said all of that, our commitment is there because one of the things when I came to the company a little over 2 years ago, our CEO was 100% committed to the entire company taking every form of training and education we could find. It was part of their metrics for their bonuses and for their pay increases. So they had choices, but the reality is the commitment was ironclad. The second thing, our CEO and our president are very committed to the fact we want to make sure that we have every opportunity not only to mentor, but to sponsor younger staff, junior staff, senior staff, and grow our own. So our commitment is solid from a hiring perspective at the top, but we've got to really transition better. And so I want to be a little bit more transparent, opposed to just give you, my colleagues were great, but I just want to tell you my truth.
So in your companies, have you all identified what are your benefits to wanting to seek a more diverse workforce, to wanting to seek a more diverse leadership team? Has that been identified? Have you all been talking that through? We'll start with you, Marion.
Yes, one of the reasons we looked at all of this types of training, all these types of education was to be able to identify what our goals are. We are an international media company that's 90 years old, a public policy magazine, or was a magazine, now we are a media company. And we rank colleges, hospitals. For us not to be diverse means that we are tone deaf as it relates to our audience and the information we're pushing out. And so we've identified the importance of it, the need of it, and we've targeted from a hiring perspective, especially on the editorial side, especially when you consider just the 50 states. Every word in the English language does not translate the same in all 50 states. You know, all of you who are from Georgia understand a dog is spelled D-A-W-G. I'm sorry, I misspelled it. Go, D-O-W-G. But the reality is the vernacular for everyone and the translation for everyone. So we have to really be very mindful that we are geographically diverse, racially diverse, community diverse, culturally diverse, gender diverse. So yeah, we've looked at it and understood we will fail if we're not.
Thank you. Sorry.
Yeah, and I would say the same. So for those of you who don't know HARMAN, you may recognize JBL, Harman Kardon, so very much in the audio space. We have an automotive business. You know, while I'm proud to sit up here and say we've got a great story today, that was not always the case. So if we go back, you know, 2 decades ago, I would say we were a much less diverse organization and a much less successful organization. So as we've been growing on our journey of success, it became clear we needed different voices and perspectives in the room, you know, as we're developing our products, you know, as we're doing true wireless, you know, headphones. You need to be sure you're thinking of your entire audience. A woman's ear is different than a man's ear. So having that diversity, particularly within our innovation spaces, very critical for our products to be able to connect back. When I started at HARMAN almost 15 years ago, very little marketing within HARMAN. Now our marketing is really, again, focused on, we want to sell our products to everyone. We don't want to sell our products to any one, you know, demographic or group of people. So to enable us to really be able to be effective at these things, we need that diversity of thought and opinion. And we've seen that success now over the past, you know, 2 decades where we really have grown. And so I think the organization can see it very clearly because we all see the studies, you know, we see the McKinsey reports on more diverse companies are more successful. But I think what you have to do in your own organization is really demonstrate it. Find what is going to resonate within your organization and show the proof within your team. No, but if you just hear, oh, it's happening, it's successful somewhere else, that's not going to be as helpful as them being able to see it specifically within your own organization.
And I think you've covered the business case for performance and decision-making and innovation. But if you think about the organizational culture and talent, Gen Z identifies, 1 in 6 identify as trans or queer. 48% identify from an underrepresented racial or ethnic group or 2 or more races. Neurodiversity is completely embraced by Gen Z. If we're not willing and able to build an inclusive culture where everyone belongs, it's a non-starter for Gen Z. It's really non-negotiable. People want to work where they can be themselves. They're not the generation who wants to cover or code switch. So that's not going to happen. They're going to go and work somewhere where they can be themselves. And so I think if we want the top talent, we absolutely have to do it.
That's a great point.
And I think that culture piece is important because we can all recruit diverse talent, but you need to be able to keep them. So they need to feel like they belong within the organization. So really, really important.
So the topic that everyone really wants to talk about is how do you engage your CEO in these conversations around equitable representation, overcoming barriers to representation, changing culture in some ways, and what are challenges? You can speak personally or hypothetically. It's up to you.
I think if we want to stay employed, we're doing all hypothetical. All names are changed to protect our innocence, right?
Yeah, I think, again, I'll say that I am lucky because I have a CEO who has strong commitment. But having strong commitment doesn't change the numbers. It doesn't change the culture. And it doesn't unsurface some of those things that might be hiding in plain sight. So I think, if it's needed, your CEO needs to understand the business case. Yeah. They may just need to understand that myth around meritocracy. They need to see the invisible barriers that maybe they didn't experience, so they don't think they're there in the company. So it's really about engaging the CEO and helping them to see what they might see or might need to see. And I think one of the things about our CEO that is fantastic and sets the tone at the top is that every business review quarterly, the business leaders have to report out on their financials and their diversity and inclusion metrics. And that sets the tone that it's really important. And we have also set goals that tie to compensation. So that's also, another way to reinforce that it's really important.
Great, thank you. Marion.
Well, I'm going to brag. I'll name my CEO. No, but Eric Gertler, who's our CEO, is very committed. And I say that because the only time I get pushback is when I come up with one of my great crazy ideas. And the idea that he will listen, and there are iterations of it to refine it, is how we get there. I don't expect him to accept that I'm going to spend $100K, right? We're going to go buy T-shirts, water bottles, and we're going to take 2 days off and do community service nationwide. I do not expect him to accept that. However, we're about to do our second annual nationwide day of service. Because it took a moment for me go from, and I do intentionally, and I hope no one repeats this, I intentionally start high. And work it to where we budget it right. And so we're going to do in October this year, a community day of service nationwide. The bulk of our employees are in DC and New York, and then we'll do 2 satellites, LA and Austin. The goal is to really get more engaged. Another thing that he went all in on by, I'm going to say happy accident. We do a program called Cultural Conversations 6 times a year, and we close the company 90 minutes 6 times a year. And all of us have lunch together, and all of us have a speaker based on a different culture, be it the gay community, be it the women's history, be it Jewish American, be it Hispanic, be it Black, be it you name it. If it's on the Hallmark calendar, we will figure it out over a 3-year cycle. And we release that cycle so no one has to come and see me in the hallway. Marion, what about, X? No, that's next year. And the goal is really to bring speakers in and discuss these various communities, have lunch so that we start discussing it. So at our senior leader, we meet quarterly senior leaders, he and the president decided to just check new things we were doing. And remember, this is not costing much. Bill says, do you all want to continue cultural conversations? That became a 10-minute shout down. They were like literally shouting them down. Have you lost it? What's wrong with you? And it just goes to show you it worked. And once I'm able to show them these things that some people may say, they work because employees want it. Employees appreciate you recognizing one another. Once that happens, we see just what you're talking about, Gen Zers. But the best part is us, what am I? I'm that 60-something group. We appreciate it. And I think that's what really helps bring our company together. So I don't have that much struggle with our CEO. That's why I can tell you his name.
Thank you. Go ahead.
I think the other thing, my CEO, also great, his name's Michael. I don't know that everybody will know him. But he's been CEO about 4 years, and his predecessor, very active and strong on DE&I. So when he came in, he was also similarly strong about it. But he was sort of getting out of the gate where he was talking about it a lot, but we weren't maybe necessarily seeing some of the actions. And so he realized then he really needed to take a much more hands-on approach. So we do an annual DE&I summit. So we get all of our senior leaders. We have about 10 senior leaders, global functions, division presidents. They come to the DE&I summit and spend 3 days with our ERG leaders, other members of the community, and they sit at roundtables and go through these exercises. And I think for our leadership team, talking to people, hearing a woman's story about the struggle she has with career development, they walk away really moved from those conversations because intellectually you can understand it, but if you yourself haven't experienced it, I don't think you feel the emotion of it. So having them in those environments where people are speaking very openly, you're engaging on those things, it brings a different sense to you on why it's important, and you see the impact that you can have. So I think him participating in those programs and those sessions really has an impact to him personally and then on the organization. So.
Thank you. So there are particular strategies that each of your companies are moving forward, implementing, to be able to take where you've identified that you have some gaps in whatever the underrepresented group is that you're wanting to move into leadership roles. Some of you are doing sponsorship, some mentorship, other leadership development programs. So help everyone understand at a very practical level what specific programs you're moving forward. And Lori, let's start with you.
Yeah, so I would say just a couple of practical things. First, I think you have to understand where you're trying to get to. So I think it's important to identify those metrics you're going to measure, and then you have to be able to measure and report on them. And then I think it's really a multi-pronged approach because there's not going to be one answer that's going to solve the issue. So you have to start oftentimes at the talent attraction perspective. So you have to make sure that you're recruiting a diverse slate of candidates. You have to make sure you have the hiring managers well prepared to go through the interview process. So one of the things we're just implementing is for managers who are if they haven't recruited in more than a year, it's their first time recruiting, they have to go through unconscious bias training in recruitment so they can understand, everyone brings these unconscious biases into the process. So we take them through that training, and we're also encouraging diverse interview panels. So again, that we're getting a diversity of assessment. And then from there, once you have the person selected, you have to make sure your culture, your organization, the infrastructure around, you have the right benefits that are supporting your organization, you're providing those right support mechanisms. So we have a very robust well-being program, recognizing that well-being means different things to different people. So we engage with our ERGs on our well-being and our benefit programs. And then from a more practical perspective, we've got leadership development training programs that are tailored to, first-time managers, mid-level managers, emerging leaders, leaders of leaders. And I think one of the things we did in the past was, as you rose up through the organization, those leading leader programs were by nomination only. So, the high potentials were being nominated, and I think if we're going to be honest, those tended to be, some of the same people. We were not getting a lot of diversity in that process, so we made the decision a few years ago to remove that nomination component from the programs, and now those are open for enrollment to everybody within the organization based on your grade level. So it's giving us an opportunity to really identify the talents within the organization and allow people to really step up and express that desire to grow and develop. Because for me, sometimes if you're nominated for a program, you go, but you're maybe not all that enthusiastic, but you have to go. But if you're signing up for it, if you're making the commitment, so I think we're getting a lot more out of those programs. Our succession planning process is also very focused on making sure we've got a really diverse set of high potentials and future pipeline candidates identified. So your whole ecosystem really has to be structured in a way where you're supporting the diversity and giving people that opportunity. And finally, we want to hear from our employees. So at the end of the day, engagement surveys, very important for us to understand what's important, where we're hitting the mark, where we're missing the mark, and looking at it from different demographic cuts. So we've got a really great leadership program, but when we did our last engagement survey, very clearly we saw that women in that emerging leader category were not feeling good about their career. They were not feeling good about their opportunity within the organization. So I'm the sponsor for our ERGs. So we talked with a lot of the women just to find out what's on their mind. And what we were finding was, while we have a great leadership program, they had specific needs that they were looking for relative to things they felt were specific to women growing in leadership roles that our generic program wasn't covering. So we've just launched a pilot program called Elevate, which is going to capture some of those topics, building your personal brand, effective negotiating, things that women in the organization identified as areas they wanted to develop in. So we've got this Elevate program. It's open to everyone. It's not a female-only program, so we've got male employees enrolled as well. But the content, we really listen to our female emerging leaders so that we can address those needs going forward.
Great, thank you. Livia, do you want to share?
Yeah, I think the multi-pronged approach is right. We do all the same things around leadership development and engagement and talent reviews and all of that. The one thing that I think has been most successful for us and most successful at companies I've worked before is our sponsorship program. So I know that every good sponsor that I've ever had who's gone out on a limb for me, who's advocated for my promotion, happens to look like me. They have been white women who have really advocated for me. And we know that, typically and traditionally, white men get many more organic sponsorship opportunities. And so we put in place a programmatic inorganic sponsorship program. So we pair people up from our talent reviews. We look at the diversity across the board and say, who doesn't have maybe the visibility? And so our criteria is really around visibility, more so than strictly around race or gender. But it does often say, who's in a different geography, who's in a different business, who has exposure to the CEO and the board, and who doesn't, and how do we make sure that those diverse perspectives are coming through? And so we take that top talent, we give them executive sponsors. We've just kicked off our next program, very excited about it. I think it's an incredible opportunity, and based on our first program, we had about 30% of our sponsees get either larger or promotions or expanded roles within a year. So this was incredible. And so I think for that, it's really important. And I'll just go back to the CEO comment for a minute, because I was at a previous organization, not mine, when we brought up the concept of programmatic sponsorship. And I remember the CEO saying, that doesn't make any sense, inorganic. Like, I have never had a problem getting a sponsor in my life. And guess what?
He didn't look like me?
He was a white man. And no one in the room said anything to challenge that, which was even more shocking. And so I do think, we can bring this visibility up, and then, our CEO and our senior executives are like, sign me up, who do I get to sponsor? And that's really the enthusiasm around it.
I cannot say anything but ditto and ditto. We're just now going into the sponsorship program. There was an education moment for us where we had to stop thinking about mentoring and look at sponsoring. Too often, we think everyone needs a mentor. A person who's been in this industry or any industry for 12 years, 15 years, and has been promoted a couple of times and moved from company to company does not need a mentor, especially if they have a spouse and children and a mortgage. They don't need a mentor. What they need is a sponsor. And so it was really about taking an opportunity to re-educate all of us. What is a sponsor? What's the role? And we're just now entering into, and I'm trying to design a program for us to look at sponsorships. I think inorganically, I like how you say that, people, individuals, have sat and said, oh, Chris is great. That's Christopher, everybody. He's great. And they've plucked him out, or they've taken Kelly out, and they've just plucked people and made that themselves, done it themselves. It needs to be a little bit more structured. And I do believe DEI, community development, and any type of engagement must be intentional.
Yes.
From the top and everyone who's doing it. If you're not intentional about it, this does not work. So that's why I love inorganic. Let's stop leaving it to the people to make their own decisions on what's best, because I'm sure that CEO never experienced many problems.
And just one other tip before you move on and build that. Don't give them another project. Don't give them an artificial, prove yourself again. Why don't you jump through 10,000 more hoops? Because I see that all the time with these programs. It's like, you're top talent, you're amazing. So go prove yourself and take on all this extra work where, you may then struggle to keep up. They don't need to do that. They just need someone
They can
to
demonstrate what
advocate.
they're already
Yes.
doing.
One of the things we do, since we do a lot of thought leadership and other types, and media company do a lot of interviews, we just start looking at, okay, we have Lori here. We decide, as we're trying to move someone forward, let them do the interview. It's already part of their job to do an interview. Give them better access, and they will shine. And normally, again, someone who's 10 to 15 years in is not going to struggle with something they've done at least 100 times. And again, exposure, which I think is also so important. So I agree with you. Don't give them assignments. Do encouragement. Pluck them out. Take them with you on your networking.
Yeah.
Bring them to events. And when you can't do an engagement, let this person go in your stead. I think those are the ways we have to do this. Our CEO is not shy about sending our president or me when he's not available. And I think we have to make sure our CEOs and president understand, if you decline the invitation, U.S. News lost a moment. Mm-hmm. You didn't. U.S. News lost. Now, granted, there are certain events you can't send a substitute to. We accept that. But there are many invitations people have, and they will reject them when they could send a sponsee. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, thank you. All right, so everyone in this room knows that when you have something that's working, people are seeing the successes that you're having, there can sometimes be unintended consequences from that. And I'd like you to talk a little bit about unintended consequences you've experienced or some challenges and really how you've dug in to be able to fix that.
Yeah, I guess I can start. I think one of the unintended consequences of our initiatives, we've had some focus over the past years on increasing our leadership, our female leadership representation. So, we've set aspirations and goals for ourselves, and we get feedback that we're hiring women just because they're women. So they're not qualified, men are not having opportunities to get leadership roles anymore, even though we're still at a much higher percentage of men in roles. There's become a real, at a certain point, there was a real negative, starting to be a negative backlash around it. And what we really had to do was really focus and reinforce, we are always hiring the best qualified candidate. So we're not ever hiring someone who's not qualified, but what we are committed to doing is making sure that when we have openings in the leadership ranks, we have a diverse slate of candidates. And the more diverse your candidate slate is, the more likely a diverse person is going to be the best qualified candidate. So I think for us, that's really been the message. We're not doing this to hit numbers and thresholds. We're doing this to find outstanding talent that's going to contribute to the success of the organization. So I think that's an ongoing message that we really have to continue to focus on across the board.
Great, thank you.
I think for us, the negative was we tried to cherry pick our way through. And what I mean by that is when it was time to do the identifying and the recruiting, we went to the easiest place possible, HBCUs. HBCUs graduate far less than probably the 10 largest PWIs. The math doesn't add up. And so instead of just going to what I call box checking moments, or going to the National Black Engineers, great organization, and they are amazing engineers. Why don't we look at all engineers or all physicians, Black, Latino, as well as Asian physicians are in those organizations too, and they're getting leadership roles there too. That's, I think, the primary space, because just the numbers. And look at HBCUs, and look at the Asian organizations, and look at the Hispanic organizations. For me, it was just a matter of educating, sharing, and being clear. Don't go the easy way out, because the numbers won't support it. And if you don't believe me, just do the math real fast. I'm gonna take 10 seconds. If there are 100 top graduates and professionals with 10 years of experience from HBCUs, the top companies are going to get the first 8. Where does that leave the rest of us? Yeah. Fighting over 2, and then we make the statement, back to the 60s, couldn't find a qualified one. That's not true, you didn't look. Right. So it's really, for me, it's a matter of making sure we understand how to play hide and seek on recruitment.
Yeah, you have to cast a wide net. The talent is there if you're looking for it.
That's right.
And I would just say, so sadly, we have to go back to like 10, 20 years ago and explain that DE&I is not about lowering the bar.
Right.
It's so offensive when people say that someone that doesn't look like you would be less qualified. I mean, DE&I is not about this preferential treatment, and it's not anti-white. And unfortunately, we're fighting all of these things that we fought, so long ago, but we have to repeat it and repeat it. And so goals, I think, are critically important, and they can backfire.
They can.
I was, again, at a different organization where there were targets set at a very senior level, and it was really felt like somebody out of the air picked a number and said, we're going to have this many people of color, and we're going to do it by this time. That doesn't work. You start tokenizing people, and that's not what any of us want. So what we do when we talk about our goals is we show the pipeline. We say, this is the employee pipeline. This is how many women we have. This is how many people of color we have. And so if we have that in our representation at our management level, we should have that as well. So we talk more about removing the barriers so that everyone can succeed versus just, trying to hit a certain number without context. And I think that's really important for employees.
And we share our demographic data annually at our company meeting, so that we're being held accountable because everyone sees it.
Yep.
And we share those numbers. We share it by race. We share it by gender. Even if it's a 1% tick up, we'll be told only 1%. But it's okay. I'd rather have that than someone say, great, 1%. I want us to always be, and our CEO and president both feel the same. Yes, we always want to see an uptick, but we want to be held accountable by the employees. And so I think everything both of you are saying is true. I mean, once you set goals, or once you try to say this is important, the backlash, it's tokenism, they're not qualified. Yeah.
And Livia, you all are sharing your goals publicly also, correct? Yes.
Yes.
And you're putting them in, are you doing scorecards or?
We release all of our data publicly as part of our ESG reporting. We
Wow.
also have a website that we announce the public goals. So yeah, we try to make it very transparent.
Great. And how about you, Lori? You want to talk a little?
We're not a public company right now, so we
neither are we,
yeah,
right.
so but we do speak openly about our goals. So
Great, wonderful.
yeah, I think transparency is very important so that people do understand not only the what but the why, and understand the how we're going about doing it, casting that wide net, the diverse slates, and again, no lowering of the bar is going on. We're increasing the bar because we're really recruiting that great talent.
So these are fabulous leaders for you to talk to. They will be here. And I want to make sure that you all are hearing what they're saying, that history may be repeating itself. It may repeat itself when a new leader comes in. It may repeat itself when you have a new organizational structure. That doesn't mean that the progress that you've made is going to go away. It just means that you need to message, you need to have goals, you need to have transparency on how you're getting there, and you need to remember that widen the view. I think that was a great view that you heard from all of them around thinking bigger about how this can get accomplished. And if you try one way, you heard them, try a different way, because you'll get there, and we all know that you're super smart and talented. Want to thank them for being on this panel, and thank you all for all of your great attention for their work.
That was great.